Have you ever been looking at a piece of music, whether that's a chord chart or a piece of sheet music, and you've seen something that just really jumped out at you as like, I don't know what that means. Maybe it's the SUS, or it's an add chord, or a 7 chord, or it's a diminished chord. Well, in this series of videos that we're about to unpack, I really want to unravel the mysteries behind some of the chords that you may be seeing all of the time, so that by the end of this series of videos, we're going to really have a deep understanding of how chords can be manipulated. Now, in Music Theory 101, my first series of videos, I basically taught you how to form what is the major triad. So that would be something like GBD, and GBD makes up the chord G major. Well, as we get into more complicated chords, what we're essentially doing is we're taking that major triad and we're taking those intervals and we're starting to manipulate them to give us some neat sounding things. That's going to include everything from the number system to 7 chords to sus chords, add chords, diminished chords, and augmented chords. And all of that may seem like it's just really overwhelming, but I want to tell you, like, my entire goal here is to make things as simple as possible, because you most likely are what's known as a practical musician. You're involved in playing music, maybe you're doing some song covers, you're looking to sharpen your music theory skills, and that's what I want to help you with. Now, as you watch these videos, I want to tell you the best way you can support the channel, if you want more videos like this, or you want to connect with me on a direct message level, is to click the link in the description for my Patreon. Okay, Patreon all access members have access to Guitar Tab and PDFs that go beyond all of these lessons. And then also, as I have more videos coming out, Patreon members are directly notified through an email every time I've got a new lesson available, so that you can really keep at it. Now, these series of videos may be kind of long-winded. You want to make sure you take your time. Feel free to pause at any point or go back and rewatch certain portions. But I really have tried to stagger these things out in a simple way that by using note cards like this, we can simply make use of the easy to understand intervals that are in music. So my name is Chris Green. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you can, hit the like and subscribe buttons. It won't cost you anything at all. But if you enjoy the content and you really want to get a lot more out of it, I encourage you to head over to Patreon and become an all access member. And then we can kind of personally tailor some lessons for you in the future. Thanks for watching. Let's get started in the numbers system. Here we go. At some point in your guitar learning journey, you're going to be approached by somebody asking if you know what the numbers system is. And I trust that you've clicked on this video because you yourself are excited to learn the Nashville number system or something to do with numbers. So in today's video, I want to do a thorough walkthrough of what the number system is, how do we implement it in our guitar playing, because honestly, when it comes to learning how to play new songs or how to come up with clever arrangements that can fit on like one tiny note card, learning the number system is going to dramatically increase not only your abilities as a guitar player, but also your ability to collaborate with other musicians out there. Now, as we're talking about on the guitar, you may not know, like, what is the practical application of why bother going through memorizing these numbers. So if you were having to, let's just say we had the lamest song in the world, and that song sounded something like this. If you memorize it by letters, you kind of lock yourself into whatever key you're playing in. If you're working with a group like vocalists or singers, and that singer says, hey, my throat's not feeling it tonight, is there any way we can change the key? The problem with memorizing things just by letter only and not knowing the number system is that when it comes to transposing or shifting things around, you might find yourself in quite a pickle. But if I memorize this simple passage based off of numbers, I'm memorizing 1, 5, 3, 4, 5. And I can take that, if we're in the key of A major, I can play it here, 1, 5, 3, 4, 5. But I could shift it anywhere I want. I could go up here to E flat. Let's say we put this song in E flat. Well, I'm memorizing 1, 5, 3, 4, 5. Not only that, but I could shift any sort of range. If I want to take it up here, so the huge benefit of the numbers is that it's a lot easier for me to memorize 1, 5, 3, 4, 5 than it is to sit here and give everything the letter value, A, E, C sharp, D, E. Now, it would be great, and it is very useful for you to be able to know what notes you're playing, but if you're in a situation where you have to play a lot of songs, it's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of brain power when you start thinking of numbers instead of individual letters. You'll be able to transpose songs like never before, but you'll also be able to carry things up and down the guitar neck to different positions. So here on this first note card, I want to give you a little snippet of what we're talking about today. The number system is simply taking a major scale that we have written out, a G major scale for this instance, and we're giving it a number value. So instead of saying G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G, which would be a G major scale, we are assigning a number to each of the letters. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then G is at the top. You can either call this 1 or personally, just my own little taste. If I'm talking about an octave above G, sometimes I'll write in an 8, just depending on what you're playing. So the Nashville number system will typically put a lowercase m next to certain numbers. We're going to talk about why in this video, but the Nashville number system will typically go 1, 2m, 3m, 4, 5, 6m, 7, diminished, and then 1. We're going to explain all this in today's video, so that's where we are headed. You've typically, if you've heard about the circle of fifths or you've been watching any of my other videos on music theory, the circle of fifths essentially shows us all of the keys in Western music. So here we have at the top, we have C major. C major has a 0 next to it. The number next to each of these keys refers to how many sharps or how many flats are present in the major scale. So C has 0. If you play a C major scale on the piano, you will just be playing all white keys. It is just C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. As you go to the right around the circle of fifths, you typically have sharps. So G major has a 1 next to it. That is because in the key of G major, a major scale, it just has F sharp. There's only one sharp in the key of G major, and that is F sharp. Then you go around in a movement of fifths. So from G to D, that is a fifth. D to A is a fifth. And you can see they increase in number value. D has 2 sharps, A has 3 sharps, and so forth. If you go to the left of C major, you have the flats. So F has 1 flat, that is a B flat. B flat has 2 flats, that is B flat and E flat. If any of this is confusing for you, I've done an entire series of videos, Music Theory 101. You can go check that out on your own time. So essentially the circle of fifths in Western music is going to cover just about every single song that you could be playing. I highly encourage you to check out the circle of fifths. We are going to center in for most of this video on G major, but just know that everything in this video is going to apply to all of the other keys as well. And that's the great thing about numbers. So a G major scale, if you don't know how to write out a major scale, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half. So this is the formula for a major scale. Again, I've covered this in previous videos, so go check out Music Theory 101 for guitar players if you do not know what this is. So with the major scale, that is how we get the notes that we are in. I've kind of bracketed off our half steps here. So from B to C, that is a half step. From F sharp to G at the end, that is a half step. And each letter is going to get its own number. So when I'm writing out a major scale, or particularly when I was starting out writing out a major scale, I want you to start with whatever key you're in. So if you're in the key of G, G is 1. If you're in the key of F sharp would be 1. If you're in the key of B major, B would be 1. All right. From there, you just want to list out your musical alphabet. So I wouldn't even care about sharps and flats. I would just tell you to start on G, and I want you to go up 7 notes. So we have G followed by A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Then you need to worry about how many sharps or how many flats do we have. G major has 1 sharp. If you use the formula whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, you have F sharp there. So we assign a number to each of the letters. So if I say 1 in G major, 1 is G. If I say 2 in G major, the 2 is A. 3 is B, C is 4, D is 5, E is 6, F sharp is 7, and then we have G again, which is 1. Now this looks incredibly confusing, but all I've done basically is written out the major scale for most of the keys, as many as I could fit on one note card. So at the top, you have C major. That is C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. The letters that are in brackets, those are major chords. So what I wanted you to notice is that in every single key, the 4 and the 5, like in the key of C, we have C is 1, F is 4, G is 5. C major, F major, and G major. That's very important. So as you look at the keys here, these major scales, what you'll notice, if you've been playing music for a while, you'll notice a lot of familiar chords. So in the key of A major, for instance, D and E are the 4 and 5. If you're playing a song in the key of A major, particularly like Western pop music, D and E will pretty much always be major. And then you have A major as well. So which ones are the most important as you're beginning? Obviously the 1, but then the 4 and the 5, those should stick out like sore thumbs. And we're going to talk about the rest of them as we go. So here's a little printout of the numbers system. The thing I want you to know is that in every major key, the 1 will always be major. 2 and 3 will be minor. 4 and 5, like I just said, 4 and 5 will be major chords. 6 is minor, and 7 is what we call diminished. So in the key of G major, we see this work out because a G major chord in the key of G major is G major, correct? A minor and B minor. If you're in the key of G and you don't got any silly business going on, right? So you're going to have A minor and B minor. That is going to be the 2 and the 3 chords. 4 and 5 are C major and D major. How many times when you're playing a song in the key of G major? How many times do you see C and D major? Quite a lot, okay? 6 is always minor, so that's why you see E minor quite a bit. And then something that's not used quite as much, especially in pop music, is the F sharp diminished chord. So in a major key, disregard this G major stuff. We're just using G as an example. The 1, 4, and 5 will always be major. 2, 3, and 6 are minor. 7 is diminished. You might recognize this earlier from our Music Theory 101. I had you memorize these cards, and this one, for example, it has a G on one side, and I wanted you to memorize G1, and then I wanted you to memorize G, B, D. A G major chord is spelled out G, B, and D, and what that means is you have a root, which is 1, then you're going up a major third to B, and then from G to D, you have a perfect fifth. So you're building your building block for your major chords is that you have the root, you have a major third, and then you have a perfect fifth. G, B, and D is how you spell a G major chord. This helps us because as you've learned G, B, and D, you've also memorized 1, 3, and 5 in the key. So if I were to give this a number value, instead of saying G, B, D, I would say 1, 3, and 5. 1, 3, 5. G is 1, B is 3, D is 5. So if you have gone through my series of videos on memorizing the note cards, working with all of the major chords, you already got a leg up on the competition. So as you're memorizing the numbers, you've already started this process. You've got 1, 3, 5 already in your head. G major is G, B, D. That's 1, 3, 5. A major is A, C sharp, E. That's 1, 3, and 5. In A major, A is 1, C sharp is 3, and then E is 5. So all we have to do when it comes to implementing this in our playing is we have to fill in the gaps. So here we have G, B, and D. That is the 1, that is the minor 3, and that is the 5. So in between each of these letters, you obviously have other letters. In between G and B, you have A. That is the 2 minor. Between B and D, you have the note C. That is our 4, okay? And then after D, you have E as well. Another way of memorizing the number system is implementing Roman numerals. So if you are familiar with using Roman numerals, this is sometimes a lot easier to look at as well, because anytime you have lowercase letters in Roman numerals, that is referring to minor chords. So minor chords with Roman numerals will have lowercase, and as you can see, the 4 and 5 chords, they have uppercase. So here we have 1, which in Roman numerals is the letter I. A capital I is 1, that is major 1. 2 and 3 are minor chords, so you can either write 2M, 3M, or you can do a lowercase 2 I's, 3 I's. Now, the music that I primarily play, it being like pop, modern music, very simple cowboy chord world, I can get away with writing 2 and 3, and I pretty much always know that 2 and 3 are going to be minor. But if you are looking at a more rigid natural numbers system, you'll see 2M or 3M. Then we have capital capital IV, which is 4. We have a capital V, which is 5. Those are major, so you just write 4 or 5. Then we have our 6 minor, so you can write 6M, or you can write a lowercase v followed by a lowercase I. And then for the diminished chord, which in the key of G major is going to be F sharp, A, and C, you can write 7, you can write a lowercase VII with a little circle, or you can write the number 7 with a little circle just above it. That's for the 7 diminished, okay? So Roman numerals, if you're not memorizing the numbers or numerical value, you can look at memorizing the Roman numerals as well. Either one will work. So now we need an action plan. So what are your steps moving forward? Now, if you've seen my other videos on Music Theory 101, you actually already know your 1, 3, and 5 in every single key. So you've already got a step up on the competition. 1, 3, and 5 in G major is G, B, D. 1, 3, and 5 in A major is A, C sharp, E. F major is F, A, C, and so forth. So hopefully you already know your 1, 3, 5 in all of the keys. If you don't, go back and watch my Music Theory 101 where we started making note cards in the first place. After that, it's really easy to just start filling in the gaps. So if you're in G major, you already know 1, 3, and 5. It's pretty easy to figure out 2 and 4. The 2 in G major is A. Not only is it A, but it's A minor. If you're in a key like B major, so B major has B, D sharp, F sharp. In between B and D sharp, there is a C, but if you know your key signatures, you know that it is C sharp. So in between B and D sharp, you have a C sharp. So that's our next steps. We want to be able to fill in the gaps. Every key, you need to be able to say 1, 3, and 5. And then it may take a little bit longer to fill in 2, 4, and 6. You may just have to do a little bit of movement in your head, but it's not that difficult filling in the gaps. You want to be able to know what the 2 chord is, the 4 chord, and the 6 chord. Now, the 7th chord, again, it's important for you to memorize that, but just know that the 7 is a half step below what your 1 is. If you're in G major, your 7 is F sharp. F sharp is a half step lower than G major. So A major, if A is 1, G sharp is 7. So typically when I'm thinking about 7, I'm thinking of a half step lower than 7. I'm not thinking going above the root, okay? Seems like a further jump from there. And then also just being able to recognize key signatures. Most of the time, if you're looking at a chord chart, it's gonna say very clearly what key the song is in. But if you're looking at a chord chart, you also need to analyze kind of what chords you're seeing. If you're looking at a chord chart and you see a lot of G major, C major, D major, E minor, we can start recognizing that that looks like 1, 4, 5, and 6 in G major, so you're probably in G major. If you're looking at a chord chart and you start seeing sharps and flats, you need to start thinking to yourself, okay, I'm seeing a lot of B flat, I'm seeing a lot of C major, I'm seeing a lot of A minor, I might be in the key of F major, okay? So it's being able to recognize those key signatures. That has been the numbers system. Where do you go from here? Like I said before, this is all building off of my Music Theory 101 videos, so make sure you go back and watch those if you haven't already, but work on memorizing your 1, your 4, your 5, and your 6 chords in each of the keys before moving on. For years and years, as I came across different chords on chord charts like G sus4 and D sus2, I would simply just play whatever the root of that chord was. So if it was a D sus2 chord, I would just play D major. Well, in today's video, I want to explain to you what sus chords are, whether that is a sus2 chord or a sus4 chord. I want to explain to you why it might have been wrong of me to assume I could just play the root of whatever the chord is. Sus chords are very important and it's not that difficult. So I want to explain that to you in today's video as part of this series of videos I'm doing on music theory for guitar players. I talked in my last video about the numbers system, and essentially when we take a major scale, for instance, the G major scale, if we spell out all the notes in a G major scale, what we'll end up with is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G. That major scale is based off of a formula that is a whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole, half, whole, half. And hopefully up to this point, you know how to write out a major scale. You can recognize what notes go in what key. And it's very important as you're learning sus chords, whether that's sus2 or sus4. So in the number system, we associate a number with each of the letters. So every note in the scale gets a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 1. early on, you started off with note cards like this, where you had G on one side. And I encouraged you to memorize G, G, B, D. G, B, D is how you spell a G major chord. Now with the number system, I can spell a G major chord in G major by 1, 3, and 5. The third in G major is B. The fifth in G major is D. This is how you spell a G major chord. 1, 3, 5. Well, in between each of those notes, obviously we have other notes. We have G, then A is 2, B is 3, C is 4, and D is 5. So a root position G major chord on the guitar is actually spelled out G, B, D, open G. This is the note D, and this is the note G. And that is how you get G major, G, B, D. When it comes to a sus chord, sus actually stands for suspended. And what we're doing in all suspended chords is we are suspending the third. So whether you're playing a major or a minor chord, this will be the same. So G major is spelled G, B, D, but a suspension, we are suspending the third. So you're taking that middle note, G, B, D, and you are removing the note B entirely. It is completely gone. Now the next part of a sus chord, the number will tell us what we are replacing. So in place of the note B, we have suspended the note B, and a G sus 4 is going to tell us to add the fourth. So in G major, we have G is 1, B is 3, C is 4, and D is 5. So a G sus chord, G sus 4, is spelled G, C, D. G, C, D is a G sus 4 chord. If you have the note B inside of this chord, if you spell your chord G, B, C, D, you are no longer playing a sus chord. A sus chord is going to suspend. We need to remove the third. So how does that come into play with our guitar? So here I've got a G sus 4 chord. Earlier we had a G major chord, which was G, B, D, G, D, G. G major. I need to remove the third. So on the A string, 2nd fret, this is the note B. Well, for it to be a sus chord, I have to remove it entirely. So my way of removing it is replacing it with the next fret up. So the 4 in G major is C. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, and then I'm going to place my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the A string. That gives me G, C, and then the open D string, there's D. So here is my G sus 4. But if I continue this all the way up the guitar, I have my open G string, then I have my open B string. But we know because it's a sus chord, we have to get rid of that B. So I'm going to use my pointer finger on the 1st fret of the B string. That gives me another C. So here we have G, C, D, G, C, and then I'm going to use my pinky on the 3rd fret of the high E string. And this, what you're hearing, is a true G sus 4 chord. Okay, G sus 4, very powerful. You can carry this over to other chords as well. We'll get to those in just a minute. But what about G sus 2? Well, if G sus 4 is spelled G, C, D, then a G sus 2 chord is spelled G, A, D. Again, we are suspending the B. The B is completely gone. Now we have G, A, and D. On the guitar, we can put this into place by simply having our middle finger on the 3rd fret of the low E. Then we have the open A string, which is good, G, A, G, A, D. There's our G sus 2. But if we want to continue it out, play all 6 strings, I'm going to need to put my pointer finger on the 2nd fret of the G string. That gives us another A. And then my ring finger is on the 3rd fret of the B string. That gives us the note D. And then at the top, the high E string, we have a G as well. So here's our G sus 2. Back to G. So just to keep this thing going, you can do this with all sorts of different chords and keys. If I have the note card D, which again from Music Theory 101, hopefully you already know D, F sharp, A is a D major chord. D is 1, F sharp is 3, A is 5. If I were going to spell a D sus4 chord, I need to suspend the third, so there cannot be an F sharp anywhere in this D major chord. I'm going to suspend the F sharp and I'm going to add the fourth. So we have D, G, and A. That is D sus4. So as you're spelling this out on the guitar, if you go to a D major chord, typically like this, I need to take this F sharp, which is on the high E string 2nd fret, and use my pinky to turn that F sharp into a G. So here's my D sus4, and that can resolve to a D major. Not only that, but sus chords, because they do not have a third, you can resolve them to a major, or you can also resolve them to the minor equivalent. So if I have D sus4, I can go to D major, or I can go to D sus4 to D minor. Which is a pretty interesting way to end. Even if I'm in a major key like D major, I can play D, A, G, D sus4, and then D minor. Good setup, especially if you're going from a major song to a minor key song. And the last one, last but not least, we have D sus2. If I were to take a D, F sharp, A chord, I'm going to drop the third and add the 2, E in the key of D major. E is 2, so we have D, E, A. A is the 5, E is the 2, D is the 1, D sus2. So big recap when it comes to sus chord. Sus stands for suspended. So we are suspending, just like you would get suspended from school. We're telling that third to get out of here. Because we don't have the third, we can either add the fourth or we can add the second. We can resolve this to a major chord or a minor chord. That is your explanation of D sus2 and D sus4. My name is Chris Green. I hope you'll consider hitting the like and subscribe buttons as we continue this video series on music theory for guitar players. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next video. All right, bye. Hey everyone, this video is all about the add chord, whether we're talking add 2, add 4, add 9, and so forth. By the end of this video, you will be able to not only recognize add chords when you see a cluster of notes together, but when you see an add chord on a chord chart, you should be able to pick it out on your guitar just with a little bit of music theory. Now, if you want to support the channel, best thing you can do is hit the like and subscribe buttons. It's completely free. Share the show with your friends. But also, if you're looking to support the channel even further and you really want to avoid YouTube turning into AI slop all over the place, I want to encourage you to become a $2 tipper. Just click the join button below any of my videos or become an all access member over on Patreon. I've got links in the description for all of that. With that being said, let's jump into the world of add chords. So in my last video, just to do a slight recap, we talked about sus chords, whether that is sus2 or sus4. And I mentioned, again, all of our chords are being based around intervals. So we have the numbers system. If I took a G major scale, which is made up of G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G, if I give a number to each of these letters, G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, and so forth. So in order to build a major chord, we would have a 1, 3, and 5 in G major. That makes a G major chord, G, B, and D. A suspended chord or a suspension is where we remove the third. So 1 is G, B is 3, D is 5. Well, G major is G, B, D, but for a suspended chord, we're going to remove the third entirely, and we're going to replace it with something else. Now, a G sus4, we have suspended the B, and then what we're adding is a 4, which in the key of G major is C. So G, C, D, this is a G sus4 chord. This is very important as we're working on add chords. We'll get to it in just a second. And then the other sus chord is G sus2. So in a G sus2 chord, we have G, B, D. We suspend the third, so the B is no longer there. And what we're replacing it with is a 2. So in G major, A is 2. G, A, D. If you ever see a cluster of notes and you see G, A, and D, that is most likely a G sus2 chord. But what about
You click on this video, you're looking for add chords. I mentioned the suspended chords because they're very similar to add chords. There's something that's a little bit different. So again, back to G major, I mentioned that a G major chord is built of G, B, and D, 1, 3, and 5. Now in a suspended or a sus chord, we removed the third entirely. Well, in an add chord, you might have already figured this out. We are not going to suspend the third at all. We're going to keep the third. And what we have is G, A, B, and D. So if I asked you what sort of chord is this, knowing that this video is about add chords, it is a G add chord, but what did we add? We added the A. So this makes it a G add 2 chord. So the big difference between a sus chord and an add chord is that a sus chord removes the third entirely, whereas an add chord is going to work in conjunction with the third. We are going to add the note A. So if you're on the guitar and you are playing a G add 2 chord, you need to form your G major shape, which I'm going to have my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the low E. I'm going to have my middle finger on the 2nd fret of the A string. That gives me G, B. And then I open D string. That is a G major chord. But if I want to add the note A, I'll have to do something else. So I'm going to take my pointer finger, I'm going to put it on the 2nd fret of the G string. That gives me the note A. So now I've got G, B, D, A. And then from there, I also have this open B string, and then I have the high G as well. Now, one thing I want to note, when you're naming any of these chords, there's going to be difference of opinions. So some people may say that this is not a G add 2, this actually is a G add 9 because we have the A above our G. You can also just lift your middle finger up entirely. If I want to have G add 2, I could have my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the low E string. I can have an open A string that gives us G, A, D, and then we have G, B, then pinky on the 3rd fret of the high E, another G. That could also be referred to as G add 2, because when it comes to the numbers that we're adding, you do have to start thinking about the octave. And on the guitar, we have many octaves present at once. So however you're naming it, G add 2, the important thing is that you have the A added with the third, okay? So G, B, D, and then we're gonna add the 2. That would be a G add 2. Now, for the next one, G add 4, instead of it being G, B, D, we are adding the C, which is the 4. So we have G, B, C, and D. If you don't know what these letters are, if you don't know that C is the 4 in G major, I want to encourage you to go back to some of my earlier music theory videos where we made these note cards where we memorized certain letters. So we memorized G, then G, B, D, 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 F sharp, A, C sharp, E. Because really, the more you can memorize these triads, you'll be able to fill in the gaps as we're developing a major scale. Now, like I mentioned before, when you're talking about a G add 9, you want to keep in mind that really a scale can just keep on going. If G is 1, and we go up the major scale, we have G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and then G. You can call that G at the top. You could either label it as 1 or you could label it as an 8. So if I'm looking at a chord chart, if I see something that is an 8, it lets me know that I need to jump up the octave, okay? Because the G that's at the top of the scale isn't necessarily the exact same as the G at the bottom of the scale. So we're going to continue these numbers as they go up. So after G at the top, if the G at the top is 8, then the A above that G would be 9. And that's why I said earlier, when you're talking about G add 2 or G add 9, what's the big difference between these two? What's the difference is the location of the add. Okay, so we added an A, but we added it to the lower octave. the lower G. On this one, we added an A as well, but the A is at the top of the octave. This is where it's going to come down to your personal preference. If I were speaking technically about what chords we're playing on the guitar, it does have to do with the location of the A. So if you do have an A that's up high on the 2nd fret of the G string, this is going to be more likely a G add 9 than it is a G add 2. But when it comes down to just practically speaking, if I hear these two chords, I could go either way. I could say that's G add 2 or that's G add 9. It's totally going to be fine in my book. And if anybody's got a problem with you about it, then you just need to get some new friends, probably. Okay, so to continue this, G add 11, the 11 is the note C, very similar to when we had G add 4, but again, it's about the location of the C. So if we go above the octave above 1 is going to be 8, which is G. Then we go A, B, C, C11, there's a G add 11. One question that will come up is, well, why don't you see a lot of G add 6? Why don't you see G add 6 chords? Okay, a G add 6 chord would technically be spelled out G, B, D, and then E, because E in G major is the 6. So G, B, D, E, that would be a G add 6 chord, but you will hardly ever see anything related to G add 6. Why is that? Well, because when you add the E, you actually end up with an E minor 7 chord, okay? Because if you take this note E that's right here, and you count it as your 1, E, G, B is E minor. And then the D, we haven't talked 7 chords quite yet, but the D is a minor 7. So if you rearrange the letters, you actually are playing E minor 7 instead of what you might try to call a G add 6. So you really won't see any sort of add 6 or even an add 7 chord, because add 7 chords are actually referred to as 7 chords. You'll either have a minor 7 or a major 7. Those have their own names, so we really don't want to say G add 7. That's going to be G minor 7 or G major 7, depending on what you're playing, okay? So this is a part of music theory where we can get a little bit convoluted, and it is going to come down to how you're thinking through these chords, or perhaps how it's fitting in your piece of music. But just know that the reason you don't see certain things like the add 6 chord is because an add 6 chord is actually a 6 chord with a minor 7, E, G, B, D, all right? So the ones that you'll see most common are add 2, add 4, add 9, and add 11. And again, when we're referencing the major scale, like if we look at C major, every note in C major is going to get a number value. You can even go above and beyond. You can say that this is 8 and this is 9. You start with the major chords, C, E, G. That is your bass position. We're going to maintain our third. Sus chords, remove the third. Add chords, keep the third. So we have C, E, G. And from that, we can add the 2. So that would be a C add 2 chord if we had the note D. We can add the 4, C, E, F, G. That is a C add 4. And then just to show you up at top, if you play the D above this octave, you could call that technically a C add 9 chord. Now, up to this point, we have covered many, many things, okay? Hopefully, you've been through the Music Theory 101 series of videos. You've seen the videos on the numbers system. You've seen my video on sus chords as well. In our next video, we're going to be majorly focusing in on 7 chords. Well, that includes minor 7s, major 7s, and so forth. So I hope you'll hit the subscribe button and join me at this next video. If you have any questions at all, make sure you drop a comment in the comments section. I greatly appreciate you hanging in there with me, and I will see you at the next video. Have fun. Do you know what 6-7 means? Well, in today's video, I'm gonna tell you exactly what it means, so you no longer have to worry about what the teenagers are referring to. Now, 6-7 is one way of writing out a 6 minor chord. You may have seen it as 6-7. You may have seen Roman numeral 6 followed by the number 7. You may have seen the 6M7. All of these could be referring to something as simple as an E minor 7 chord or an A minor 7 chord, depending on what key you're in. Now, if you haven't seen my video already, we have the numbers system. And essentially, we're giving each note in the musical scale, we're going to give it a number. And in a major key, 1, 4, and 5, those chords built on those roots will be major. 1, 4, and 5 will be major. 2, 3, and 6 will be minor. 7 will be diminished. And in today's video, I particularly want to talk about this interval going from the root to the 7th scale degree. Because when you're constructing your chords, typically a chord will have 3 notes. It could have 2 notes, it could have more, but typically we see 3-note chords. Well, when you add a 7th, typically you have a 4-note chord. So we want to talk about how we can add this 7 chord in so that you end up with things like E minor 7, as mentioned before, or you could even see an E7 or E major 7. I want to break down each 3 of these 7 chords so that you know exactly how they're spelled. And hey, maybe if this isn't the exact answer to what 6/7 is, you can probably astonish a lot of teenagers out there by just discussing the numbers system with them. Tell them that 6/7 is probably referring to a 6 minor with a 7th scale degree being added. My name is Chris Green. I want to welcome you here to my channel, Learning Guitar with Chris Green. This channel is built for beginners who are absolutely just starting from scratch. You've never touched a guitar before, well, this channel is for you. Or if you're looking for some more advanced techniques, maybe to sharpen your theory, this channel is also for you. Best thing you can do is hit the like and subscribe buttons. Jump over on Patreon if you want to support the channel and see me kind of stand out amongst some of the AI slop that is out there. I greatly support all the members over there, and thank you for watching. If you don't want to become a member, simply hitting the like and subscribe buttons goes a really long way. So this video is entirely about 7 chords, whether that is a major 7, a dominant 7, or a minor 7. Real basic stuff. E major. An E major chord is built up of the notes E, G sharp, and B. If this is brand new to you and you have no idea how I ended up with E, G sharp, B, I do want you to pause this video. I want you to go back and watch my Music Theory 101. I break this down super simply. Those of you that have been watching and tuning into the channel, you're way ahead. You already know E, G sharp, B is E major. Well, like I said, this is a typical major chord. It's going to have 3 notes, but we want to add a 7. So the way that we're going to add a 7 is going to be depending on what you're going for. Okay, so we have an E major chord here that is E, G sharp, B. But what I've got added is a note D. Now, if you're familiar with the key of E major, you know that D natural is not in the key of E major. This should be D sharp. Well, if you run across an E7 chord, make this whatever you like. If you have a major chord and you simply add a 7, by default, this is going to be referred to as a minor 7 interval. E to G sharp, that is a major third. G sharp to B is a minor third. B to D is a minor third. So first and foremost, if you're starting with just a basic chord like E, if you add the number 7 to it, the 7th is going to be a whole step below E. So in E7, we have E, G sharp, B. We're going to add the note D, okay? A quick way to learn this, if you're working on 7 chords, is I don't like to think of like from E going up a 7th scale degree. I actually like going backwards. It's just easier on my head. It's easier for me to think going backwards from the 1 going down. So if you are simply just adding a 7 to a chord, if you write it out like this, if you take an E major chord and add a 7, I want you to think that that 7 is actually a whole step below the root. So whatever your chord's name is, if this is E7, you're going to go a whole step down from E and you're going to get to D. That will leave you with an E7 chord. Now, just for fun, if the note was A, so we were building an A major chord, how would you know on an A7 chord what the 7th scale degree is? So if you're going from A major, which is A, C sharp, E, I'm going to go a whole step below A. So a half step below A is G sharp. A whole step is the note G. So in A7 chord, we're going to have A, C sharp, E, and then the note G. It's often referred to as a flat 7 interval, but easier if you're just building a basic 7 chord. If you write the note C a C chord, C, E, G, and you need to write C7. Well, that's going to be a whole step below C. If you go a half step from C, you're at B. Half step below that, B flat. So C, E, G, B flat is a C7 chord, okay? The next type of 7 chord is going to be MAG7. Now, you may think at first it looks a little redundant. If I just remove this 7 entirely, you see a capital letter E, which already lets you know that that's a major chord, but then you see MAJ, and you might be wondering, why does it have to say MAJ? Aren't we saying E major and then major? MAJ is short for major. Well, the capital E lets me know that this is an E major chord. If I were writing an E minor chord, I'd probably use a lowercase e. That's usually how you know. The fact that it has MAJ and then a 7, this MAJ is actually telling me what type of 7 I'm using. So before, what we had was just E7. This is E major 7. This is actually letting me know that instead of this being E, G sharp, B, and D, what we're getting is a D sharp. D sharp is a half step below E. So if you're in the key of E, you know that D sharp is going to be a half step below. Well, that is where we get our major 7 interval. So the MAJ isn't necessarily referring to the E major chord. The MAJ is letting us know what type of 7 we're using. So an E7 chord, as we learned before, E7 is going to involve a whole step below E, and E major 7 is going to involve a half step below E. So if you're only going a half step below the root, that will be referred to as a major 7 chord. So we've gone over 2 types of 7 chords so far. We have the 7 chord, often referred to as the dominant 7. So E dominant 7 chord, that's going to be E, G sharp, B, and D. Then we have the major 7 chord. E major 7 is E, G sharp, B, D sharp. What's the difference? Well, one of them you've got D natural, the other one you've got D sharp. There's one more type of 7 chord, and that is going to be the minor 7 chord. Now this one, just to be a little bit confusing here, this one is simply a 7 chord built on a minor chord. So E minor 7, like we started out before, well, an E minor chord is not the same as E major. E major is E, G sharp, B, but an E minor chord has a lower third. So instead of G sharp, we're getting the note G. So E to G is a minor third, G to B is a major third, and then we have B to D, which is a minor third as well. So in this instance, like when we had the E major 7 chord, I told you to disregard the MAJ and just look at the first note. If I were truly writing this out, going for my professionalism, I should have written a lowercase e. But to me, when I have an uppercase E followed by a lowercase m, that is letting me know that this is an E minor 7. It's going to be built with the D natural, and it's going to be based on a minor chord, E minor. So different ways of writing out the minor 7 chord. I would find any of these to be acceptable. If you are going to school for this, your teacher or whoever is teaching you, they may prefer certain ways. If you're following the Nashville number system, you will need to be careful about how you're writing things out. But however you write it, if I'm looking at this postcard, I know that this is a minor 7 chord, okay? All this can feel extremely confusing, especially if you're just getting started out. So I really encourage you to go back and watch many of the music theory videos I've already done on Music Theory 101. But when I'm thinking through the process of how am I constructing a 7 chord, I really want to know, am I dealing with a major 7 or am I dealing with a flat 7? Okay, a major 7 is going to hold true to whatever key you're in. So a major 7 in the key of G, like a G major 7 chord, is going to have the note F sharp. Major 7, think of it as being a half step below the root. A 7 chord is going to be based on a whole step below the root. So G major 7 is G, B, D, F sharp. G7 is going to be G, B, D, F, okay? So that flat 7, the fact that we're playing an F natural with a G major chord, that is going to give us that dominant 7 sound. If you're playing a minor 7 chord, whatever the root is, you need to go a whole step below, and that'll give you your note. Like I said, A minor 7 is going to have the note G, not G sharp. And A7, a dominant 7 chord built on A, is going to have G sharp. Okay, so you really just need to know, are you a half step below the root or are you a whole step? If you're a half step below the root, you are dealing with a major 7. If you're a whole step, then we're talking about a 7 chord. We're talking about a flat 7. And just some clarity so you can see this in action. Here is a G major scale. You know that the 7th scale degree is F sharp. If you see an F sharp in the chord or you're constructing a major 7 chord, you're going to make use of the F sharp for sure. But if you are dealing with minor 7 or a flat 7, it's going to actually be the note F natural. So you're taking the F sharp, which is normally in the key of G. Normally you're always going to see an F sharp, and you're actually going to be lowering it a half step. And that's why with a G dominant 7 or a G7 chord, that's why we get F natural, because F is a whole step below the note G. Again, just so you can see this, we take the root. If we go a half step down from the root, that is a major 7 chord, or that is a dominant 7 chord. If you go a whole step below the root, that is where you end up with the flat 7s or the minor 7 chords. If you have any questions whatsoever, the best way to connect with me is to become a Patreon member. I'll have the links in the description below. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you at the next video. Thanks for watching. Augmented chords and diminished chords. When it comes to learning how to play the guitar, you usually know that you're doing a pretty good job when you strum a chord and it sounds good. If it sounds pleasing, then you know you're in the right spot. But what happens if it sounds a little bit dissonant? Some of these chords can sound kind of ugly. Now, there is a certain place for all chords out there, but augmented chords and diminished chords are definitely going to have the least amount of play time, most likely, depending on the music that you're into. Even if you're a classical guitarist or a jazz musician, augmented chords and diminished chords, they can be fun to play, but they're usually not the most pronounced chords on your chart. These are going to be known as transition chords. So as you're playing from one chord to the next, you may see these things pop up every now and then. So I think it's very important that even though these might be a bit of a struggle to play when it comes to the guitar or whatever musical instrument you might be into, it's very important we put our thinking caps on, our theory hats on, so that if you do run into any of these chords, you can at least be able to pick out what notes are in that chord. Hello everyone, my name is Chris Green. This channel is Learning Guitar with Chris Green. So if you're an absolute beginner and you've never touched a guitar, believe it or not, this channel is for you. Or if you're looking for some more advanced techniques, this channel is also for you as well. The best way to support the channel is to actually head over to Patreon and become an all-access member. That is a place where we can correspond to each other through direct message. And also, every time I have a new video out just like this, you'll receive an email from me letting you know that it is out and about. Now, if you can't afford to become an all-access member, by all means, hit the like and subscribe buttons. That definitely goes a really long way to help support the channel. Everything I do when it comes to music theory is revolved around using note cards just like this. So if you are an all-access member, there are several PDFs and guitar tab available over there on Patreon that you can check out as well. With all that being said, you don't have to watch any of the videos before this, but I want to encourage you to pause the video and go back and watch my Music Theory 101 and then the videos just before this leading up to augmented and diminished chords. Let's get our note cards and get started. First thing I want to do is establish kind of a base from where we're going to work from. And of course, I like to go to G major. If you're a guitar player, G major is going to be quite friendly to you. If I write out a G major scale, I'm going to write out the notes G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. It will look something like this. And if you're familiar with my video that I did on the number system, you know that we can go through each of these and we can assign each of these letters a number. So if I say, what is the 1 in G major, I would say G is 1, A is 2, B is 3, and so forth. Now, I did mention also in that video that there are certain patterns we see in a major scale. So in G major, the 1, the 4, and the 5 chords, these will all be major. So 1, 4, and 5 are always going to be major chords. The 2, 3, and 6 chords are going to be minor. So we use a lowercase m for those. So A minor, B minor, and E minor. If you've been playing guitar for any amount of time, you see a chord chart that's in G major. What do you see all the time? You see G major, you see C major, D major, and you see these minor chords as well. Well, there's one that we have not given much attention to in most of these videos, and that of course is the 7. So in the key of G major, the 7 chord is going to be what's called a diminished chord, okay? So this video, we're primarily dealing with diminished chords and augmented chords. So we need to talk about this F sharp diminished chord. Now, when we're building out the chords, our baseline is to write out the scale, starting with whatever the root is. So we're going to start with this F sharp. And if I were to write out a G major scale, starting on the note F sharp, I would go F sharp, G, A, B, C, D, E, and then F sharp. Again, with F sharp being our 7, G is 1, A is 2, and so forth. So here we have a G major scale starting on F sharp. And what you do when you're constructing your most basic form of these chords is just to skip a letter and circle it. So we have F sharp, we have A, and we have C. So if I circle F sharp, A, and C, what you'll notice is we have the notes F sharp, A, and C, and that is how we spell a diminished chord. So F sharp to A, this is known as a minor third. And then from A to C, we also have a minor third. Now again, I've said before, you don't have to have watched my other videos on constructing chords, but if you are familiar with the stuff from Music Theory 101, you know that normally F sharp is followed by F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp. Well, what has happened is instead of us having F sharp, A sharp, and C sharp, our third and our fifth within the diminished chord are actually flat. So we have a minor third going from F sharp to A, that is a minor third. Then from A to C, we have another minor third. So we have F sharp, A, and C. Anytime you have this construction of a minor third and a minor third, that is going to be a diminished chord. Now, the way that we are going to recognize a diminished chord, like on a chord chart, if you're just looking at this normally, you'll see something like this. It will be F sharp dim, okay? D-I-M standing for diminished. For all of the classical people out there, you may see something like this, where it has a little bit of like an exponent, like a little circle. That is an F sharp fully diminished chord. And then we also have F sharp half diminished, which we will get to in just a minute. So you may see some equivalent of this on a chord chart. If you're looking at a chord chart and you see any of this here, that is what you are looking for. So what is the function of an F sharp diminished chord? Well, diminished chords in a major scale, if it's the 7th chord that you're playing, an F sharp diminished chord is going to want to resolve to G. And that's why these are often used as transitions. If you'll notice back on our G major scale, when we have F sharp in A, F sharp is the 7, A is the 2. This 2 in A is going to want to resolve down to G, and the F sharp is going to want to resolve up to the note G as well. And that's why they sound very pleasing when you hear diminished chords being used in a transition. So like I've said, an F sharp diminished chord is simply written out F sharp, A, C, where we have a minor third followed by a minor third. But when it comes practically speaking to the music that you're hearing or music you would see on sheet music, most of the time we're going to involve the 7th scale degree. So instead of it being just F sharp diminished, it's usually going to be some sort of F sharp diminished 7 chord. Now that 7 can either be known as half diminished or a fully diminished. So I want to explain that to you so you know exactly what we're talking about. So the first one is called a half diminished 7 chord. So if I write out our diminished chord, which is built on F sharp, we have F sharp, A, and C. F sharp to A is a minor third, A to C is a minor third, C to E is a major third, or if you're counting from F sharp going up to the note E, F sharp to E is a minor 7, I mentioned this in my 7 videos where I talked about how to get to the minor 7 from your root, you can simply go down a whole step. So a whole step down from F sharp, you go F sharp, F, E. So to get to our minor 7, that's going to be a whole step below our root. So a half diminished 7 chord is going to be spelled F sharp, A, C, and E. If you don't have access to sheet music or you're not a classical musician, most likely you're going to see this written out here in F sharp minor 7 flat 5. Now it looks completely confusing. Hopefully as you're watching this video, you're following along with me. This might start making a little bit of sense, but why does it say flat 5? The F sharp minor 7 chord, if I were to just write out F sharp minor 7, I would go F sharp, A, C sharp, and then E. This would be known as F sharp minor 7. But the reason it says minor 7 flat 5 is because we need to take that 5th scale degree, which is currently a C sharp, and we are going to lower it. So now it is F sharp, A, C, E. So these two cards actually say the exact same thing. An F sharp minor 7 chord with a flat 5 is going to be spelled out F sharp, A, C, and then E. So again, if you're looking at a chord chart, if you're not looking at sheet music, you will most commonly see this written out. This is basically an F sharp half diminished 7 chord. If you're looking at any sort of sheet music or you're looking for basically the more proper way to write this out, you're going to see this little circle with a line going through it. That is the symbol for half diminished, and then it's a 7 chord. So I know I'm building a diminished chord. As soon as I see this little circle, I know it's a half diminished because it's got a line going through it. And then I need to have the 7th scale degree, so it is a F sharp half diminished 7 chord. Now that you kind of know what half diminished 7 chords are, we can talk about fully diminished 7 chords. So the difference between a half diminished and a fully diminished chord, if I just write these two out here for you to see, it'll become pretty evident what is going on. So on the top, you can see this is our half diminished 7 chord, and then the bottom, we had something change with our 7. So instead of it being a minor 7, we have a diminished 7. So this is the note E flat. And it looks pretty strange because you've got an F sharp and you've got an E flat all within the same chord. But that's why I'm saying as we get more into this, these chords are not super as common. They're definitely possible. I want you to be able, in your head, I want you to be able to spell out what a fully diminished 7 chord is. But the difference is the 7th scale degree. So instead of it being a minor 7, which is this up here, F sharp to E, we have a diminished 7. So we're going from F sharp to E flat. That is known as a diminished 7 interval. And that is going to be written out as F sharp fully diminished 7. So we're going to have a circle that does not have a line going through it. That lets me know that it is a fully diminished 7 chord. And what's neat about these is they are built entirely off of minor thirds. So F sharp to A is a minor third, A to C is a minor third, and then C to E flat, that is also a minor third. So minor all the way through. These ones sound super spooky and strange. Again, diminished chords and augmented chords are mainly used for like transitions. This is not going to be something that you give a ton of emphasis to, but it all depends. Music is certainly different as you're going. 3 different ways to recognize these fully diminished or half diminished 7 chords. A fully diminished 7 chord built on F sharp is going to be F sharp DIM. DIM stands for diminished. F sharp diminished 7, that's going to be a fully diminished 7. F sharp minor 7 flat 5, again, that's letting you know it's a half diminished 7 chord. And then you could also see it written out as F sharp O7. So on the keyboard, if they're not able to write this small O that's kind of hovering, you might see just an O there, and that stands for the fully diminished 7 chord. We've been talking a lot about F sharp diminished 7. Just know that whatever key you're in, like if you're in G major, most commonly you're going to see F sharp diminished 7. If you're in the key of A major, it may be a G sharp diminished 7. If you're in the key of E major, it may be D sharp diminished 7. No matter what it is, a diminished chord tends to want to go a half step up. So if you're on an F sharp diminished 7, most likely you're going to be resolving that to G. You're going to resolve that to the 1, no matter what key you're in. But again, it's just going to depend on the piece of music. Now let's move on to what are called augmented chords. And believe it or not, these are actually a lot simpler to internalize because again, as we're altering chords, there's only so much you can really do. And then it just comes to choosing what kind of chords you like. So if we have an augmented chords are going to be based on major thirds. So one thing right off the bat is that an augmented chord will always be based off of a major triad. So in the key of G major, if you remember from earlier when we wrote out our little G major scale, G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, G, I told you that the 1, 4, and 5 are always major. In a major key, we're going to have G major, C major, and D major. So any one of these 3 chords can be an augmented chord. Now, an augmented chord, like I said, is based off of a major triad. So we're going to start off just with a simple G major triad, G, B, D. Those of you, it's kind of a sentimental moment, but way back on our first video when we made 7 note cards, one of the first ones I told you to make was GBD, and here we are making use of it over and over again. GBD is G major. What's going to make this an augmented chord is what we do with the 5th. So instead of it being GBD, we're actually going to make it GB sharp. This is known as an augmented chord. So we can write this a couple of different ways. You may see it with a plus sign like this. That means G augmented. Or you may just see G followed by AUG. So G aug, G plus, however you want to write it, it's going to be the same. Now, just for practice sake, if we're in the key of F major, so F major has 1 flat, that's going to be B flat. If we write out a B flat major chord, typically you're going to have B flat, D, and F. This is known as B flat major. If we're going to make this a B flat augmented chord, we need to take the 5th and we need to raise it a half step. So we're going to write B flat, D, and then F sharp. B flat, D, F sharp. This is known as a B flat augmented chord. So we're going to write B flat, and then a little plus sign will do. Now, with these augmented chords, again, with music, you can do absolutely anything you want, but we're looking for what is this kind of leading tone taking us toward. So a good rule of thumb is that if we have something like this B flat, D, and then we've altered this 5th note, okay, so we have the F sharp, that F sharp is really close to G. So if we're in the key of F major and I play a B flat augmented chord, where am I going to go? Most likely I could go up to the G minor, which is a half step away. So in the key of F major, G is going to be a G minor chord. I could look to go to a G minor chord. You can go anywhere you want, but these augmented chords are very, they've been referred to as spooky or ghostly. They're going to want to go to a minor chord. You'll hear that nice and succinctly. In fact, let me go ahead and grab my guitar. The easiest one to spell out is G augmented. If I just simply have my G major chord based on my ring finger on the 3rd fret of the low E, we have G, B, and then the D string is open. Well, if I make that D string, if I put my pointer finger on the 1st fret of the D string, we have G, B, D sharp. Then we have the open G string, we have the open B string, and we have another G. Sounds wrong, right? It sounds very dissonant. It sounds like I'm not playing the guitar correctly. And again, that's why these things lead towards being transitions. But what am I transitioning to? Well, on my guitar, I know that the note that I altered is on the 1st fret of the D string, and that is now a D sharp. That D sharp wants to go up to the note E. If I build a chord around that E note, you can hear that resolution. I can make an E minor chord. So here is my G augmented chord, and here's E minor. Be a neat way to end a song, certainly, if you're trying to fit it in. So G augmented. If I go from G augmented to G major, it just doesn't hit the same. So whatever you're transitioning to, it's completely going to be up to you. It's up to the composer. But personally speaking, I can take that augmented chord and I can just go up a half step. So again, whatever the fifth that has been augmented, this is at F sharp, I'm going to want to go up to G minor. So case in point, augmented chords are built on major triads. What we have a GBD chord. G to B is a major third. B to D is normally a minor third, but B to D sharp is a major third. So we have a major third to a major third. That gives us an augmented chord. So augmented chords are built on major triads. If you're in the key of C major, you could have C augmented, you could have F augmented, you could have G augmented. It needs to be major third and major third as you're constructing them. And I would recommend that you take whatever that last note is in the chord. Like if you're in the key of C major and you have C augmented, it would be C, E, G sharp. Raise it up a half step and go to that A minor chord. G sharp kind of wants to go to A, and in the key of C major, you have A minor. So you can check that out as well. Then diminished chords, most of the time you're going to see them with a 7. That's either going to be a half diminished 7, which is built on a minor 7, or a fully diminished 7 chord, which is built on a diminished 7. All that being said, I know this was a tough video. If you're into pop music, if you're into just modern music in general, this is something that's more for your brain exercise. You may not put these things into place, but as you come across different pieces of music, it's really good to not be surprised when you see certain things on a chord chart. Personally speaking, if I see something like an F sharp minor 7 flat 5, that is a half diminished F sharp chord, half diminished 7 chord. So it's important to know just to keep the theory brain smart, but that kind of brings a wrap into what I'm calling Music Theory 102. There are so many more places that we can go from here, but I just want to encourage you, if you've had any sort of struggles along the way, reach out to me over on Patreon, become an all access member. You can have that direct chat together with me. In fact, I've had a few people already reaching out about how they are implementing this music theory in their own playing, whether they're playing certain instruments like guitar, or if they're playing bass, or if they're into classical music, or they're just looking to sharpen their skills. It's really a good way to connect as a community, and especially before we head on to some more advanced techniques, as we start talking about rhythms and scales, I want to encourage you to make sure you've got all this stuff solidified. So feel free to go back into Music Theory 101 and just have this stuff maybe running in the background, put it on your TV, get your note cards together, try to keep it as sharp as you can, because everything we do from here on out will constantly be building on the last lesson. My name is Chris Green. I want to wish you the best of luck as you learn music theory, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. All right, bye.